first home was a shanty. The walls built of logs, the roof of poles split in halves and hollowed out with the axe. The first row was laid hollow side up, the top row hollow side down, and fitted to the lower row. In theory, these would shed the rain, but when they shrank in drying, the water had ready access. The family slept in bunks, nailed to the wall. They could have used the best bird's eye maple, but for ease of cutting and handling, used lighter timber. The Gold family, who moved in around the same time, were 2 miles north near Sand Lake, but that 2 miles could only be traveled on foot or on horseback, as there was no road. While Father was building the shanty and clearing a patch of land for a garden, their savings rapidly dwindled, so before long he had to go to the front, in quotes, where the more productive farms were, and work in the harvest fields. The previous winter had been a very hard one with heavy snows. As supplies were freighted in, flour was always in short supply, and the nearest people were served first. It was said that one old man, a Mr. Humble, had made 14 trips to town, about 10 miles, before he got his flour. Meanwhile, the people had to live on their scanty stock of vegetables. At last our family was reduced to eating frozen turnips. Gertie called herself the turnip baby, because she was born at that time. With the poverty, Grandpa and Grandma were at their wits' ends. They were a Christian couple and always had family prayers, so they prayed earnestly for help and guidance, for after the children were fed, there was not a crumb left for themselves. They decided to seek for aid, so Mother went one way, Father the other, to beg or borrow enough to keep soul and body together. Father had gone about half a mile when he met a man who said, "I was just coming to see you. My brother wants some work done on his farm and for you to do it. Here is $5. Father lost no time in hastening after Mother and in going into town to buy supplies. They both felt that this had been an answer to prayer. And you may say, why didn't they appeal to the government? At one time they did, and the answer was a shipment of wormy cornmeal. So often the government money goes through, well, this anti-house. There's very little left for the needy. That fall, when Father returned to get out logs for a house and called on the neighbors, that fall when Father returned, he got out logs for a house and called on the neighbors for a bee, or house raising. The new home was far more comfortable and had an upstairs. There was a living room and bedroom downstairs with a summer kitchen at the back. 2 years to the day after Gertie was born, Charlie came. Mother's children had a tendency to be a couple of weeks premature, and the woman said, "How is it he came so soon? It is only 8.5 months since Mr. Tall came home." So Pa jokingly told Mother, "Never mind, I'll adopt him." So 2 or 3 years later, Charlie proudly announced, "I'm Pa's doctored." But Grandpa had a sense of humor.
So how long did they live there?
Well, they had been in Canada. They must have been in Montreal about 5 years before they moved, I think. And Dad was born in Kearney, and he was 15, I think, when they moved to out west. So they must have been there about 20 years, barely surviving, because the only place Grandpa could work was at Parry Sound, where they were taking out lumber, and he went there all the time and worked. And I must relate one incident in the girls' school life. This is Auntie Ethel saying this. This would be my aunt's lives. There was to be a school concert, and the girls came home all excited about it. But what about new dresses? The Rattenbury girls were all having new ones made. How about it? Mother would only say, "We'll see." She didn't know where new dresses were to come from, but just trusted in Providence that a way would be found. Father had worked for a very friendly couple, and the wife took a great interest in his family. She and Mother wrote to each other occasionally, and she found Mother's letters very interesting. One day, not long before the concert, a box of used clothing arrived from her for Mother to make over, which she gladly did. The cloth was good, and she managed a dress each. red for Hattie and navy with red trim for Gertie. None but themselves knew of it until the night of the concert, when it was found that the poor tall girls were the best dressed ones at the concert. How thrilled they were. 2 years and 2 months after Fred's arrival, his brother Alfred Ernest arrived. As Mother was 42, she thought he would be the last child, and made a great pet of him. When he learned to talk, he made many smart remarks and had a keen wit. He walked early also. Possibly his long breastfeeding period accounts for it. Fred and Alfred became great pals. Another incident Mother used to tell me of was one time when the children were playing around the house. She had just taken a heavy iron pot off the stove and set it down while she put the lid on. The stove lid on. When Fred ran around the stove, stumbled and plunged his arm to the elbow in the hot liquid. Of course his sleeve held the heat, so when they got the sleeve off, his arm was blistered to the elbow. That's Herb's father, you know. All he would let them do was put on cold spring water. Strange to say, cold water is now recommended by doctors. At any rate, his arm healed without any more trouble. One day in early spring, my brother Henry, all the children had to go out to work as soon as they were old enough to work, see. And one day in early spring, my brother Henry came home for a visit. Work in the bush was over, and then breakup would soon start. Then the log drive would begin. Henry was a skilled woodsman and a good swimmer, so Mother was not too concerned about him. One day the call came for him to go. He took Mother in his arms to say goodbye and started off. Then he turned back and kissed her again. Could he have had a premonition? All went well on the river drive, and they arrived at the lake and formed a log boom. This was formed by hurling the logs into large groups and chaining the outer ones together, leaving an opening at one side. A building called a wanigan was erected on the boom for eating and sleeping. This boom was anchored a half-mile offshore. One day Henry and some others took the rowboat and went ashore. On their return that evening, the boat was missing, so Henry volunteered to swim to the wanigan and bring the boat back. There was a mist on the water, and he soon was out of sight. He never reached the wanigan. His friends waited and watched. Presently the boat came back for them, but no news of Henry. Mother had felt very low-spirited all day. Somehow when Father appeared in his best clothes, she was not surprised. She looked at his sorrowful face, whispered, "Who is it?" Father answered, "Henry." "Dead?" she asked, and Father nodded. How can I describe her agony? I was only 2 years old, so have no memory of it. She told me later that she could not sleep by night nor rest by day. Gertie was the only girl at home, and she was only 12. She did her best, making cups of tea and imploring Mother to eat. After 10 days, Henry's body was found, floating, and her last hope failed. She told me in later years she might have lost her reason, had not a black wall come before her, and she slept at last. Henry, being the oldest of the family, had been her sole helper and companion while Father was away at work. He had been clever and loving, and always considerate above the rest. That he was clever was proved when he spent a few weeks in Montreal at the home of Father's old partner, Mr. Davis. There he learned to play the auto harp and read music. When he came home, he taught the family many new hymns and part singing. He also made Mother a good kitchen cupboard, although he had few tools to work with. It was left at Uncle Charlie's, but has probably been destroyed. That's all she says about him there. But the story that I remembered as a child was that he had gone to get groceries. I thought that was what Grandma had told me. Gone to Emsdale to get groceries for the family. But according to Aunt Ethel, it was a different story.